Welcome to the Friday 4 p.m. Eastern Slurve Expert Chat. Chris Raybon, Adam Levitan. We are here to answer all of your DFS and fantasy football questions. We will be here every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern throughout the NFL season. Be sure to go to slurve.com to check out a bunch of other expert chats. Evan Silva and Davis Maddock have one that's really good. You can find chats for other sports as well, but we want to hop right into these questions. So, Adam, Coby Fleener, week one, FanDuel, he's not even getting full first team reps. News came out he is not quite in sync with Drew Brees from a route running perspective. What do you think about Fleener in week one?
Yeah, so who said that he's not in sync with Drew Brees, right? These are like beat writer observations or something, which I'm fine with. Like that's a lot of what I look at. I'm just skeptical that they're going to give a guy $36.5 million to fill a role they have vacated by Ben Watson, vacated by Jimmy Graham, and then just, bench him or whatever. I mean, yeah, we have questions about Coby Fleener's talent. I'm not questioning the opportunity. And on FanDuel in week one, he's 5,400. I think he makes her an excellent fade in tournaments because I think he'll be 25, 30% owned. But I think in cash on FanDuel for 5,400, there's not a lot of downside to Coby Fleener in a game I want exposure to anyways. Obviously the Saints and Raiders.
Sure, man. I think, I agree there. I think in FanDuel is definitely the site to play him. Cash games, tournaments will be a little highly owned. Do you think his ownership percentage will be affected by this news about, just that he is not in sync?
Mm, let's see what happens in the third preseason game. If he, doesn't do anything, loses reps to Josh Hill or whatever, then yeah, I think that maybe it'll go down. But for now, if he comes out and has a good game tonight, or at least is on the field and goes 3 for 30 or 2 for 30 or whatever, I think he'll be fine from an ownership perspective.
Sure. So moving on, there were some games last night. What do you think of the Devontae Freeman, Tevin Coleman backfield split, Adam?
Yeah, I got a lot of questions about this, because obviously all preseason the Falcons have been rotating um, Tevin and Devontae kind of evenly on a series by series basis. I think that they're doing it to protect Devontae. I think that they don't want to go out there and run him into the ground and then let Tevin come in. They want to give Tevin some chances with the first team. But I think when push comes to shove, Devontae is the better pass pro back. Devontae is the better goal line option. Devontae is certainly the better pass catching back. So I think that if it goes to a merit-based system, I'd still be fine with that because I think Devontae would win in a merit-based competition too. So a little bit of worry with the 50-50 in the preseason, but not a lot. I just took Devontae Freeman today at 24th overall in a draft, and I was pretty happy about that.
Definitely, totally agree. There is a lot of pie to go around in that offense. The running backs are going to have to be involved. When Mohamed Sanu is your number two receiver and Jacob Tamme is your number one tight end, you're going to have to involve the running backs, and I think there will be enough work for both of those guys. I want to get your opinion, Adam, actually, on an interesting situation because I think a lot of people are going to think about playing him in week one. That's Zach Ertz against the Browns in week one. Now, in the last preseason game, Ertz really wasn't playing with the first team offense. It was more Selleck. I think he played 14 to 15 snaps, and Ertz was not in on nearly that many. So, I mean, of course, there could be something going on behind the scenes, but what do you think about Zach Ertz? Should we be worried?
I mean, he's really only time he's had good games in his career is like the last 4 games of each of the last 2 seasons. Other than that, he's been a pretty utter disappointment. And now we get Doug Peterson coming over, who is kind of the villain in the Travis Kelce case. We always wanted Travis Kelce to get more and more and more and more and more and more, and it was just never coming because they were using Anthony Fasano or James O'Shaughnessy or whatever. And Brent Selleck can play, not from a fantasy perspective, but Brent Selleck can play from a real life perspective, and coaches like that. So, yeah, I mean, I think Zach Ertz fits well with Sam Bradford. Obviously Bradford's not a guy that's going to push it to the outside, and there's really nobody to push it to the outside to on the Eagles anyways. So, I don't know, man. I mean, I'm okay with Ertz. I don't absolutely love it. I'd rather roster Travis Kelce, to be honest with you.
Definitely. So Matt says he's got a doodle too.
Yeah. Man, I mean, had a shout out to Jerry, National Dog Day, big day for her, and she's sleeping right now. But I mean, you might be able to see her back there on the couch there. But it's the absolute light of my life, man. That's all there is to it.
Awesome, man. What else can we talk about?
I didn't get your Zach Ertz take.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I think Zach Ertz was he had these huge games. I believe it was against Washington for 2 years in a row where it was like late season. He would catch like 10, 15 passes against Washington in a Chip Kelly offense. And this isn't a Chip Kelly offense anymore. It's going to be a lot slower. And I mean, Zach Ertz never was a red zone threat as much as we think of tight ends that way. I think he had 2 touchdowns last season. I don't particularly love him. I mean, tight end is one of those positions where if a guy gets 1 touchdown, if he lucks into a touchdown, you're usually good to go at the position in DFS. So I probably almost never say completely fade any tight end, especially because I did some research and I found that the best values on FanDuel and DraftKings for tight ends are usually for home favorites, and Zach Ertz will be that in Week 1 against the Browns, but I'm not particularly enthused about playing him.
Yeah, I think like it'll be a little bit contrarian to pay up at tight end in week one, right? So like I think Gronk will be relatively low owned. I think Kelsey will be pretty low owned. I mean Kelsey is 5K on DraftKings. He's the second most expensive tight end, and then you can go all the way down to the guys we've talked about before, like Julius Thomas, like Dwayne Allen, etc. But I don't think many people are going to be paying up. I think Travis Kelsey and Gronk are both somewhat interesting in week one for tournaments only.
Definitely. We can stick with tight ends for a second. What do you think of Jared Cook? You think he is going to be the team's main tight end? You think Richard Rodgers is going to kind of eat into his snaps? Do you think Jared Cook can even perform at a high level, even though he hasn't in the past? Do you think Aaron Rodgers will make a difference?
Yeah, he hasn't performed at a high level in the past when his best quarterback that he played with was Matt Hasselbeck at the age of like 35. I mean, Jared Cook was with the Rams, was with the Titans. I couldn't fathom two worse situations for a guy who is a pass game threat. Now he goes to Aaron Rodgers. I mean, Jared Cook has always been long on talent. Now he's long on situation and quarterback. So, yeah, I mean, especially if Jordy can't get right or isn't right, I think Jared Cook makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I'm kind of warming up to him as kind of an 18th or 19th round pick in season long just to kind of see what happens and if he can distance himself from Richard Rodgers, who, I mean, Richard Rodgers is kind of a stiff, you know what I mean? Like Jared Cook's a legit athlete and Richard Rodgers to me is a stiff.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat. I really like Cook's upside. The only thing I worry about with him is throughout his career, he's been kind of this practice all-star. Whereas when he gets in games, I mean, I know he's had the bad quarterbacks, but he just seems to, kind of disappoint in games, drop passes. And I just hope he's not one of those guys who just tends to choke. I mean, if you're choking, it really doesn't matter who feeds you. But I mean, if anybody is going to change that, it's going to be Aaron Rodgers. And Eric, he says Jared Cook is great in shorts and a t-shirt, and I mean that's the worry. But I mean at 2,700 on DraftKings, which I believe his price is, I don't think you really have anything to lose because Jared Cook is a guy. He was acquired by Green Bay because they felt last year with Jordy Nelson out that they needed more field stretchers, and they specifically got Jared Cook to stretch the field down the middle, run seam routes. So what that tells me is that even if Jared Cook only catches 2-3 balls, one of them could be a splash play. And you don't really see that for tight ends that much. It's hard to get tight ends making big plays. Delaney Walker will make some, every once in a while, but Gronk, of course. But it's really tough to get those kind of plays. So I think a lot of upside there in tournaments. Wouldn't touch him in cash, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, Eric says he was infuriating to watch as a Rams fan. Like, who wasn't infuriating to watch as a Rams fan? Like, who were you excited to watch as a Rams fan? I don't know. Like Tavon Austin? I don't even know. Kenny Britt?
Oh man, no.
Benny Cunningham?
Benny Cunningham's actually looked. Well, we could talk about Benny Cunningham for a second. What do you think about? I guess there's kind of some debate lately. Todd Gurley obviously going to be a great standard league pick. PPR, is he the RB1 for you in PPR with maybe, I guess, some concern about his receiving workload?
He wouldn't even be on my draft board in PPR considering his ADP. I mean, I'm not on Todd Gurley, giving a two down back on a team that will likely be losing a lot and doesn't play in the pass game at all. I mean, I'll take David Johnson. I'll take Ezekiel Elliott. I don't see much different in the situation between Adrian Peterson and Todd Gurley, other than the fact that the Vikings are actually a pretty decent team. So yeah, I don't know. I'd like someone to make the case for me that Gurley should be a first round pick in PPR. I don't really see it. I mean, like people think he's like such a freak talent that he's just going to run for 1,500 yards and 12 touchdowns on a team that goes 8-8 and wins games 14-13.
Well, I mean, they're not fucking going 7-9. So, but I agree with you. I think you hit it right on the head with Adrian Peterson. I think wherever Peterson's going, which is kind of the early second in PPR, I believe, that's where Gurley should be going. I don't think there's any difference between those two. I mean, Gurley's younger, so I could see you want to take him ahead of Peterson, sure, but it should be the same range. And because of that, I don't really have any of Gurley either. Chris asks, how good is Darius Slay of the Lions? That's a good question. And is T.Y. Hilton being overlooked because everyone is stuck on Moncrief? I know you study cornerbacks a lot, Adam, so why don't you take it away?
Yeah, I would consider Darius Slay to be in kind of the second or third tier of number one cornerback. So like he's certainly not in the Vontae Davis, Patrick Peterson kind of tier, and he's probably not in the next one either. Which now I would consider somebody like Darrelle Revis in the next tier, and some other guys like that, Bashard Breeland, Josh Norman, etc. I think Slay is below that, but the real problem for Slay is, I mean, they have zero around him. Like their secondary is just a total train wreck. Similar to Miami, which Miami has like nobody in their secondary whatsoever. With Vontae Davis or Indy, obviously has zero people in their secondary too. But yeah, I think the bigger question on the Hilton thing is like totally agree with Chris that Dante Moncrief will probably be one of the highest owned wide receivers on DraftKings. I think around 18 to 20 probably sounds about right. And I think T.Y. Hilton probably won't. I don't think T.Y. Hilton's being overlooked. I still think he'll be 13 to 15 or so, just because everybody wants a piece of this game. But yeah, I mean, I have no problem whatsoever rostering T.Y. Hilton, and I think probably a little bit of a case of paying up to be a little bit contrarian. I mean, people are going to go to Moncrief because he's cheaper than Hilton, and they have similar expectations. But I mean, T.Y. Hilton's stats when Andrew Luck plays are just off the wall. Like he just absolutely destroys. So I'm on. I think thinking about pivots the way Chris is thinking about it. You can pivot at price point. So like I was talking with somebody today about trying to figure out price points off of Marvin Jones, price point pivots off of Marvin Jones, and price points pivot off of James White. Another way to pivot is within the same game on a player that could take away the opportunity or take away the fantasy stats from that player. So if we think that Dante Moncrief, or we hope that Dante Moncrief has a bad game, well, T.Y. Hilton's probably going to have a good game. So yeah, I think he's on the right track there.
So that being said, staying on the topic of pivots for a second, I think Dwayne Allen's going to be highly owned on DraftKings at least because he's 3,200. We know Moncrief. Mentioned Hilton. He's still at a good price. Where are you on Dorsett in that game?
Yeah, so obviously there's downside. There's a low floor with Dorsett because we assume that they're going to be in three wide and give Dorsett a ton of opportunities. I think they certainly will. We don't know how many of their plays, like the first or second read, is going to be Dorsett. It might not be very many at all. So I don't know. I mean, Dorsett was not like 3K. I think it would be another case of kind of paying up to be contrarian because Dorsett is 4,500 in week one on DraftKings, and as you mentioned, it's an interesting pivot off of Marvin Jones, who's 4,600. So I don't hate Dorsett. There's obviously a lot of mouths to feed there.
Definitely. Golden Tate ownership moving down because of the Marvin Jones. I think so, yeah. I think we talked about this last week. I think Golden Tate is going to be an interesting play. I mean, he's probably a little pricier than you'd want him to be. But again, he's a pivot off of somebody. It's again pretty much paying up to be a little bit more contrarian because Marvin Jones is obviously going to get the most ownership in that game.
I just made like I'm trying to work on this year making like an optimal tournament lineup that I put in like all the higher stake stuff and also all of the single entry stuff.
Mhm.
And like one of my first thoughts was, I'm going to get off of Marvin Jones and get on Golden Tate because there's like a $2,700 difference, which Golden Tate's clearly overpriced and overpriced drastically relative to Marvin Jones. But their expectation, I mean, I think Golden Tate's expectation and projection is better than Marvin Jones in this game, and I think he'll come in at a fraction of the ownership. So I think Golden Tate in tournaments makes a lot of sense.
Right, I agree. I think when you're looking at tournaments, you can't always be super price sensitive because at the end of the day, you need that overall upside. So, Marvin Jones, obviously, when you look at projections, he'll be a better dollar for dollar value, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he has the same upside that Golden Tate has. Tate could easily catch 10 balls in any given game. So I think that's something to keep in mind. If Latavius is the chalk on DK as a road underdog, how about going with Gore at the same price point as a home favorite with a great team total? I actually like Gore in cash games, even though, I mean, it's DraftKings. I know he doesn't catch that many passes, but I mean, I think he's decently priced enough. I would play both of those guys, honestly, in cash games, but I'm sure Gore will be lower owned, so I don't mind the pivot, but he might still have significant ownership. I don't think people are. I think people are on to the home favorite thing by now, and just because that game is going to be so popular, I don't think Gore's ownership is going to be
Yeah.
super low. What do you think?
No, it won't be. I like the idea of getting off of Latavius in tournaments, though, because there's obviously concerns with Latavius that he's just not that good. And we haven't seen DeAndre Washington mix in with the first team during the preseason at all, but he's played well, and I think he has a chance once the regular season comes to mix in at least a little bit. So, yeah, I mean, if Latavius is going to be 25% or something, I think there's a lot of merit to getting off of him. I'm trying to go as kind of cheap as possible at running back on DraftKings. I think Sproles makes some sense. I think Theo Riddick makes some sense. I think Shane Vereen makes some sense. Like, these are all guys, like, if I'm fading Latavius, I'm going to try to go real cheap. The kind of pivot that I think off Latavius that I find interesting, I wonder what you think about this, is Mark Ingram in the same game, because if people are rostering Latavius, they probably don't want to roster two running backs going against each other. And Mark Ingram, who's 6,600, which is expensive, more than I normally like to pay for running back on DraftKings, but should be very involved in the pass game and in the red zone.
Yeah, I like that actually. Mark Ingram is somebody who was getting a ton of receptions
Mm-hmm.
last season, and I think that's another thing when you talk about Fleener and you talk about what his role is going to be. I mean, you have to keep in mind Ingram. When you can only pass to running backs and tight ends so much after a while, and that's another kind of knock on Fleener. And I really actually like that Ingram call. I think Ingram will definitely be in the single digit ownership.
Oh, yeah.
And just being on that Saints offense, when you're rostering running backs, especially when you're paying up, you want those situations where the running back is on a good offense, and even if Drew Brees is torching the Raiders, which I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, Drew Brees can torch anybody. The Raiders defense should be improved, but I mean, Mark Ingram can easily benefit, multi-touchdown upside just from being in the Saints offense, period. And then he has that reception upside. So
Yeah.
I like that call a lot.
I have a hot take here that I came up with today. I'm curious your take.
Let's hear it.
Um, so I was on the clock at pick 25. This is like a industry league, but it's one of the rare industry leagues that's actually for money and actually will be played out. So it's actually real. So I was on the clock at pick 25. Sammy Watkins was on the board. Amari Cooper was on the board. Demaryius Thomas was on the board. LaShawn McCoy was on the board. Eddie Lacy was on the board. But I went with the hottest of hot takes with a guy that I think has a chance to set the NFL record for most receptions in a season, and that's Jarvis Landry. And this was a full PPR format, obviously. I don't know if this take is too hot. I think that with the way that Miami, I project to really struggle running the ball, yet still run an up-tempo, no-huddle offense, and then run that no-huddle offense into a defense which is just dreadful, like theoretically the worst in the league. Just so many more possessions, so many more snaps for Jarvis Landry, who was like the first, second, and third read on every one of Ryan Tannehill's dropbacks. Caught 110 passes last year. The NFL record is 141 catches What if I told you that Jarvis Landry is going to catch 145 passes this year, set a new NFL record?
Woo, I can't rule that out, honestly. I think, that's an interesting take. I mean, the only thing that would worry me on that is I don't know if Ryan Tannehill can ever be on the other end of like an NFL receiving record. But I mean, I love Jarvis Landry. I think a lot of people who don't watch as much football kind of say, oh, Jarvis Landry, low efficient, low yards per catch or whatever, not. But Jarvis Landry is a really good receiver. He really gets open quickly. He wins his routes quickly. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a hot take, but I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of the year we're sitting there. And I think it's interesting because you said you were on pick 25. That means round 3, pick 1, right?
Yes, yes.
That means you have Antonio Brown, right?
I do have Antonio Brown,
So
yes.
that means that team could have 2 guys to set the NFL record in receptions, because who else on the Steelers is catching the ball if Ladarius Green's not playing, if Sammy Coates is Cordero Patterson, Eli Rogers, okay, he could start in the slot. But, I mean, I think Antonio Brown has a chance to – he hasn't even led the league in targets in any of the years he's been top 3. I think Antonio Brown is as good a bet as any to set that record as well.
Yeah.
So
yes. I mean, maybe I'll get like 280 catches out of my first 2 wide receivers.
Oh man, that would be legendary. You got to keep me updated on that. Okay, let's see. Chris asks, are people overthinking things, not just playing a guy like Zeke Elliott, especially on FanDuel, assuming the Cowboys play the way we think they're going to play? What do you think?
Yeah, who's not playing Ezekiel Elliott? I mean, I kind of want to play Ezekiel Elliott, don't you?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. Let me see what's his price on FanDuel. I'll go bring it up right now. It is.
He's 7,300 on DK. I mean, he's expensive. That's like the biggest barrier.
He's 79 on FanDuel. That's running back 6. I mean, I'm fine with that. I think I actually would like him on FanDuel a little more, just because I think FanDuel is a little more touchdown reliant, and I think Elliott, that multi-touchdown upside is there, and I also think Lamar Miller 7,600 is the next price running back on Well, what's Lamar on DraftKings? He's probably in the same range. Yeah, 7K on DraftKings. So I think a lot of people are going to gravitate to Lamar Miller as a home favorite, and that will probably keep Elliott's ownership in check. So yeah, I like that. I don't think it would be super low.
I would play David Johnson over Ezekiel Elliott on DraftKings, but I probably won't play either of them in cash. Let's just say that.
Yeah, definitely. I think in cash you really want, at running back anyway, you kind of want to start from the bottom up and really find the guys. I think you want to go as cheap as you can on cash for running backs, usually on DraftKings, and then pay for some of those wide receivers that you think are going to catch 5, 6, 7, 8 balls. I think that's usually the way to go. So, I mean, I think a guy like Latavius or, put guys in that range in cash game will be fine. Adam, how do you feel about the Seahawks D in Week 1 against the Dolphins? Are they chalk? Imagine they'll be higher owned on FanDuel with the prices.
I haven't thought a ton about defense yet. Miami is a bad team for sure. Seattle's at home. They're probably the biggest favorites. So, yeah, I think that Seattle will be chalk. I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of people are going to try to use, at least on FanDuel, I think they're going to try to use St. Louis, especially if Blaine Gabbert starts. Or really if Kaepernick starts either, because that includes the Monday slate, and people aren't going to be able to use St. Louis on DK, so they'll want to use them on FanDuel. So I think they might be kind of chalky over on FanDuel. But I don't know. I like some other defenses. I think the Vikings have shown an aggressiveness that I like to see. I don't know. I haven't thought a lot about defense. Have you?
Yeah, I was talking to some guys in the industry last night about this, and I was saying that a defense that kind of would jump out usually would be the Eagles at home against the Browns, but and I know they're like a 6-point or so Vegas favorite, but for some reason I don't have that much confidence in that line. And it's not because of anything about the Browns and their offense. Like this is preseason, it's whatever, but like I just don't think the Eagles are that good of a team. Like I don't have confidence in them necessarily, blowing out anyone at this point, even a team that should be as bad as the Browns. So what do you think about the Eagles defense?
Um, I'll say in my tournament lineup on DK right now, I have the Browns defense in, and maybe
Ooh.
that's like when I look for a GPP defense, I'm trying to get as low owned as possible because there's so much variance in interception returns for touchdown, fumble return for touchdown, kickoff return for touchdown. There's so much variance there, so I don't expect many people to be on Cleveland at all, and they're only 2,300, which saves a ton. I mean, Seattle is 3,900 and Cleveland is 2,300. Not that I think Cleveland has a good defense or anything. I'm just like, when I'm picking a GPP defense, I'm kind of just like, give me something, give me something that has some upside, and I think Cleveland does.
An interesting side note on defense is I'm looking at the 4-for-4 value reports right now for DK, and what's funny is the Raiders and the Saints come in as the top two values and just dollar for dollar, and I think those are really interesting plays because everyone's going to be on the offenses in those games, and when everyone's on an offense in a game, you go in a tournament, and first of all, if one of the defense does well, they steal a touchdown from somebody in that game, and I think that might be an interesting super contrarian play as well. But
hmm
let's we're getting a lot of questions now. Can you play Langford in cash on DK 4,700 at Houston?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, Houston has a good defense. Langford's on the road, but how many three-down plus goal line backs are there in the NFL, and how many of them are under 5K? Probably zero. So at 4,700 for Langford, I think he's fine in cash.
Definitely, I agree. I haven't fully built my cash game lineups yet, but he's definitely in consideration for me because of those exact things you mentioned. Will Justin Forsett come out with a heavy snap percentage in week one? Feel like he's a sneaky option to plug in with good upside. What do we think about Forsett, man?
Yeah, so if you try to do projections at all, the hardest team to do it for is the Ravens. And when things are hard, when it's hard to project, that's when people are just like, you know what, screw it. I'm just not going to roster anybody here. So if you can get the Ravens right in this game, if you can pick the running back to roster and the wide receiver to roster, because I think they'll score points. Like I don't think Buffalo's going to like suffocate them or anything. So if you can get it right, you have a pretty good chance. I think Forsett will start the game. I really don't know what their plan is, but I think taking shots on Forsett and taking shots on Buck Allen, who's pretty clearly their best pass catching option out of the backfield, makes sense. And I want to take some shots on Kamar Aiken and Mike Wallace as well.
I think I'm waiting for the third preseason game. I want to see exactly how they divvy up just all of their offensive snaps early in the game because I think Forsett is still the starter. I know earlier this year, I think Evan Silva was talking about Forsett as a sneaky release candidate even.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, they do have 4 running backs in that backfield right now. So, and one rookie who's definitely going to, he's probably going to make the team. And then you have Buck Allen, a second-year guy, he's probably going to make the team. So, I mean, really interesting. If Forsett is starting, I think certainly he's a sneaky play because I think Langford will have, I guess, decent ownership. I thought he wouldn't when we talked earlier on the DFS Edge pod, but you kind of convinced me that he probably will, and I guess with all the preseason buzz, he probably will have significant ownership, even as an underdog.
Yeah.
The Pats scheme against the most dangerous player on the other team, right? Is that a myth? I actually did a study on this. I published it on 4for4. It's called "Does the Pats D Really Stop the Top Option?" And what I found was they actually, statistically anyway, they do. They wide receivers are averaging, I think, double-digit percentage points below their normal PPR output. Wide receiver ones against New England. So I mean they do it to wide receivers. I don't like running backs. I didn't find the same correlation because he's asking as far as David Johnson goes.
Right.
I like David Johnson in this game. I like David Johnson in any game. David Johnson is not really a guy I think because if he's playing a tough defense, I would play him because he can catch so many passes anyway, and people will be off of him. And if he's against average or whatever defense, I would play him just because he's a monster.
Yeah. So
yeah.
The problem with the whole Pages thing is when we get a situation like we have in week one, how do we know that Belichick considers David Johnson the other team's most dangerous player? Why would it not be Larry Fitzgerald? Why would it not be Michael Floyd? Like, I can't say for sure that Belichick thinks that David Johnson is the player that he should scheme against. And obviously it's much harder to scheme to stop a running back than it is a wide receiver.
Absolutely, I agree. I think that applies a lot more to receivers because you can manipulate different type of coverages. You can roll coverages. You can double team.
Hmm.
Belichick is famous for using his best corner on the second best receiver so that he can double the
Right.
top receiver. So there's a lot of things you can do in the receiving game. As far as the running game goes, I mean, you can't really stop a team from handing off to a guy or throwing a little dump off. I mean, I know, they did stop Marshall Faulk once, but usually it's really tough to do that. Um, are we stealing boats and leaving our belongings to get off Fleener Island? We're back to Fleener again.
Yeah, I mean, we already hit on this. I already said that I have 5,400 on FanDuel. I'm playing him. I'm not off the island.
Yeah, there's going to be so much talk in the offseason, and we're just itching for some real football to start. That I think we really hang on. We hang on every little thing that happens, and I mean, guys have rough camps. Coby Fleener has never been the guy to really stand out as like a guy that's going to draw a lot of rave reviews. There's always been talk about him not trying hard or being soft or just not being a good football player. But the bottom line is when he was involved in the offense with Andrew Luck, when Dwayne Allen was out, Coby Fleener was able to put up numbers and he was able to make some big plays down the field. And I mean, at tight end where there's so few options that really have that upside, and where quarterbacks are so important. We always think about receivers singularly. Sometimes we don't connect them to the quarterback, but in reality, I feel like it's probably more than 50-50. Quarterback in a lot of cases. And I think Drew Brees can, regardless of what's going on. I mean, I think all you need is a couple of throws from Drew Brees, and Coby Fleener could hit value. So if that drives his ownership down, I'm fine. I'm fine with Fleener.
Are you playing tonight's preseason slate?
I don't think so. It depends. I got some things to do after this, so it really depends how much research I get to do. I don't, maybe I'll throw in a tournament lineup or two, but I don't know if I'm gonna have enough time to research the whole slate. What about you?
Yeah. Of course I'm playing, but last night I had like literally the stone nuts. Like I would have had like a literal five-figure night, and then 5 minutes before lock, I took out Jason Witten and put in Jordan Cameron, and took
Ugh.
out Tyler Lockett and put in Mohamed Sanu. Like I couldn't even breathe last night. I was on such tilt, but I really had like the stone nuts last night. So of course tonight I'm gonna try to hit the nuts again and play double of what I played before and get buried. But yeah, yeah, of course I'm playing tonight. If you guys are out there, hit me in the head-to-head lobby.
Tyler Lockett. Speaking of Lockett, he clearly behind Jermaine Kearse in the wide receiver
Yeah,
snaps yesterday. We talked about this on the chat last week. Lockett and it's interesting because I feel like everything that we think about Lockett came true, where it's like he just wasn't on the field for that many snaps, but yet he scores a touchdown, he makes a big
right.
play. It's like that's Tyler Lockett. You have to live in if you want to draft him at his cost, like you have to live and die by those like 5 targets and hope that he makes
Right.
a big play. So I mean,
Yeah, yeah. Like I said on Twitter today, I'm happy with Tyler Lockett in the eighth round. It's just never going to happen. He's going in the fifth round, he's going in the sixth round, and I'm not willing. Excuse me, I'm not willing to take him at that price.
definitely. Any interest in Jason the Giant Killer Witten in Week 1? I have been very vocal. I am interested in Jason Witten in Week 1. I think I've gone on record as saying I think that's going to be his biggest game of the season. Is going to be Week 1 against the Giants. Because now Darian Thompson, I don't know if he's fully healthy. The Giants safeties are not very good. The Giants linebackers are not very good. This has been the story with them every season for the last 2, 3, 4 years because this is the way Jerry Reese chooses to build rosters. He chooses to neglect all of the defensive players that cover tight ends. And I think Jason Witten, you look at Jason Witten's track record, I don't put too much stock into, previous games against the player because a lot of times what happens is if a guy has a lot of success in one game against a team, he won't the next time because they'll see that on tape and scheme to stop it. But in Jason Witten's case, he's just runs a lot of those routes against players that aren't really good at coverage on the Giants. What do you think,
Hmm.
Adam?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever rostered Jason Witten because I don't roster guys that can't run and are like 40 years old. Yeah, I really don't think I ever have. I wasn't even on my radar for week one, but it's certainly like one of the best possible matchups that you'll have. And if I'm going to use an old guy who can't move, there were time to use it would be early in the season. I mean, that's when he's going to be freshest. Um, so yeah, I wish he was a little bit cheaper. I mean, he's 4,100 on DK. Like he's more expensive than Julius Thomas, which is kind of egregious to me.
Yeah, yeah, I think Thomas is an interesting play in that game, so I think that game has some shootout potential. David asks, how does the pace of a game play out when a fast team plays versus a slower team? Do you, off the top of your head, do you know how that works, Adam?
How does the pace of a game play out when a fast team plays versus a slower team? Um, yeah, I think, time of possession is always going to be kind of fueled by success rate on third down and stuff like that. So, like, it's hard to project how many plays a certain team's going to run because no matter how fast you want to play, like Chip Kelly's going to want to play really freaking fast this year, but he's going to go three and out a ton because his team sucks. So, like, it's hard to reel off a lot of plays when your team's going three and out. So, yeah, I think projecting pace is maybe gone overboard. I don't think it's really the most important thing. I'm way more interested in efficiency. I think you've talked about before, like in season long, it could make more sense because you have hundreds more plays over the course of a season. Where in a game, we're talking about five, six more plays per game.
Absolutely, totally agree. Over the season, those 3, 4 extra plays are going to add up to 60, 70 plays a season. And, if a certain player is getting, 20, 30, 40% of those plays, that's going to increase his value by a round or something like that. But in one game, it's really difficult. You really just want to exploit the matchups and look at who is going to, look at market share and who's going to be able to exploit the matchups in the game. I don't think trying to project pace is the best use of time management. Time management really crucial element in DFS as far as there's so much you could potentially be looking at. I don't think you want to look too much at that. Uh, what what do we find is our most profitable form of cash game entries, head to head versus double up versus 50-50s? I'll let you talk more about this, Adam, but I'll just say for myself personally, I like head-to-heads because then I can play one lineup and diversify my opposition rather than I think when you start playing 50-50s more, I don't like to play one lineup and just a bunch of 50-50s. So for me, it's head-to-heads, but I know you are a real big cash game player, Adam. So what do you think?
Yeah, so Parker said this is off topic. I don't think this is off topic at all. This is probably the most important topic that we should be talking about. I mean, people want to talk about players and schemes and everything. And when you're playing DFS, I mean, understanding where to get your money in and where to get it in good, I think is the most important thing, or at least the most overlooked thing. So, yeah, I have my numbers here right in front of me. I am in the money almost the same, a little bit more in head to head. So 62% in head to head, 61% in double up, but my ROI in double up is up over 10% of my ROI in head to head is around 6.5%. So obviously, when you're cashing double ups, if you can cash at the same rate as you do in head to heads, and you're a winning player, it's more profitable to play double ups because every time you have an entry that's in the 57th percentile or in the 61st percentile, you win, you double your money. If the same thing happens to you when you're playing head to heads, well, your ROI isn't that great because you win 60% of your head to heads and you lose 40%. So I think, it's kind of similar. There's obviously way more variance if you're playing double ups, as Chris was alluding to. When you play double ups and 50-50s, you either win the money or you lose the money. In head to head, you win a percentile of the money or a fraction of the money based on how good your lineup is. So I think the really huge double ups on both sites are soft enough that I like to play them. But I would just be good with game selection. Look who's in the games. Calculate the rake. I mean, it's so important. You know what the rake is in head to head in every game, but in the double ups and 50-50s, they can be different. I'm trying not to pay more than like 12% rake in my games, and I'm trying not to play against a lot of guys that I know are good, and you can kind of look through the 50-50s and see who's in them. So yeah, I mean, game selection is right up my alley. I can talk about this all day.
Interesting. And Parker's saying he's saying yeah, he kind of had the same experience you did, where his ROI is higher in double X than head to heads
Right.
in NFL, but it's actually the opposite for the other sports. So I think also it comes down to your skill level as a player too, and who you're playing your head to heads against, because I mean, if you are just posting your games in the lobby and certain people are selecting them, maybe your ROI is a lot worse than if you're taking other people's games. So I think that kind of comes into play as well. Uh, is the Bears D line good enough to be nervous about Lamar Miller even as a home favorite? I know you've been saying, Adam, that the Bears are a funnel D.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the Bears front seven is good. I don't think that means Lamar Miller can't have a good game, especially because Lamar Miller plays so well in the pass game. I think they'll use him there a decent amount, not just on screen plays, but he can actually line up out wide, and I've seen them do that in the preseason. So, I don't know. I think Lamar Miller, Brock Fuller, obviously Nuke. I think they're all fine in week one. Maybe even Braxton Miller. Who knows? Like I think that this Houston offense can be way better than people think. And yeah, I think rostering Lamar Miller and DeAndre Hopkins together in cash is fine too.
What do you think of Brock Osweiler as a player, as a quarterback? Like, forget DFS for a
Hmm.
second. Just like, what do you think of him as a quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, we have somewhat of a small sample, even though he's been in the league for 4 years. He's only started like 6 or 7 games. I thought he was okay, but I mean, think about what they were asking him to do. I mean, don't screw up, kid. You know what I mean? And I think he'll have more freedom here to do more, spread his wings with a quarterback guru like Bill O'Brien. So I think the jury's still out on how good Osweiler is and how good he can be. I mean, the dude's like 6'8", like 220 or something, or like 6'8". He's kind of skinny, but like he definitely looks the part. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think the jury's out, but I think this. I mean, I think he'll probably get better as the year progresses too. I mean, he's in a new offense. You added new pieces to that offense. Miller, Fuller. So I mean, Hopkins is the only one really returning. And so I think Osweiler is a guy that even if he struggles a little bit during the first half of the season, I think you might see him come on a little bit. I uh, heard that he's really good in the classroom. He's one of those guys. So I think could be kind of like a cousin situation where starts might start off slow, come on down the stretch. But against this Bears defense, I just don't see. I see some actual physical mismatches in that secondary where I think Fuller can run past them. I think Hopkins can just get open at will against this Bears secondary. So I do like the Houston passing game, and I like Osweiler's price in week one as well. One of the cheaper quarterbacks that you can play, and I'm always looking for a cheap quarterback.
Yeah, RG3. Hey, RG3 is the cheapest starting quarterback on DraftKings by like $700 or something. Like he's so cheap. He's like 5,600 on DraftKings. I think he's actually gonna be kind of popular.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, he is because I mean, if I'm playing in a bunch of MFL 10s, I joined a bunch on like the last day to sign up, so I'm like, there are a bunch of going on now, and like RG3 is just going way earlier than I've ever seen him go. Like I've seen him go like in the 13th and 14th round now, just like another, any of those other quarterbacks that you
Mhm.
take in that range. So I think he will be popular. What do we think of the Browns offense? Let's talk about the Browns because they're a really popular topic. Some people are like, it's preseason. You can't, it means nothing. They're going to be horrible. Other people are like, oh my God, top 10 offense, Terrell Pryor, the next Josh Gordon. Like, what do you think of the Browns offense? If you could just give kind of a rundown of pretty much all the important skill players on that offense.
Oh God. I mean, this is like everybody wants to talk about the freaking Browns, and I get it. They have some serious speed, some serious athletes at the skill positions. I mean, Terrell Pryor is 6'4", 220, runs a 4.4. Corey Coleman was probably the arguably the number one wide receiver prospect, at least the most explosive wide receiver prospect in the class. They'll get Josh Gordon back in week 4. They have Gary Barnidge, who was so impressive last year. They have Isaiah Crowell, who's leading the way in snaps, but Duke Johnson is going to play in passing situations. Like, they're loaded. So it's set up really well for RG3, who is using his legs again to really do some damage. I think the Eagles secondary is probably, or the Eagles defense as a whole is probably better than people think. Like, their offense is awful, but their defense is better than people think, which is a concern. But, I, yeah, see, I see Matt wrote in here, Labs has RG3 at 2 to 4% ownership. Actually, I do that. So I had RG3 at 2 to 4 ownership. I will be changing that on the next sweep. So I think he'll be. I'll probably bump him up into the 5 to 8 range, and then see how it goes.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. I think by the time to see if he has another good, another good game, I think he could definitely even climb to double digit ownership pretty easily. Um, okay, we got some more questions. Let's see. Is the how good is the cornerback one for Green Bay? Do we see this game going for? How do we see this game going for Allen Robinson and the Jags?
Mhm. Yeah, so Allen Robinson is one of the guys I really don't worry too much about. I mean, I expect him to see Sam Shields. I expect him to see Demarius Randall. They have Clinton Dix and Morgan Burnett at safety. Like, in theory, on paper, the Packers could have a really good secondary. I don't think it matters that much when it comes to Allen Robinson. I don't think it's like a dream matchup. He's not facing, the Colts without Vontae Davis or anything, but I think it's fine. So yeah, I'm okay with Allen Robinson. Probably won't play him in cash, but I'm certainly okay with him as wouldn't let the matchup scare me.
Yeah, I like him in tournaments because I think he's at 8,300 on DK. He's in a situation where there's just all these stud wide receivers, higher and lower than him, and that usually keeps ownership somewhat in check. And like you mentioned, I think that's really the most important point is that Allen Robinson, he's kind of matchup proof. Like it doesn't really matter if he's covered. It doesn't really matter if he's double covered.
Hmm.
You can throw the ball to him and he can make a contested catch. And we know Blake Bortles has no problem doing that. So it's not like Blake Bortles is Alex Smith where he's just going to shy away from throwing to a receiver who's covered. So love Robinson. Triple touchdown, 3 touchdown upside every time he plays. Even if I don't think he had a 3 touchdown game, but he could easily do it. Do we prefer Brock Osweiler or RG3 and GPPs in week one? That is an interesting question. I mean, at this point, I think I would have initially said RG3 if you asked me this maybe a week and a half ago. But now that RG3 is getting so popular, I think, and he's the cheapest. I think it's actually a little more interesting to pay up a little more for Brock, who will probably have lower ownership. What do you
Hmm.
think?
Yeah, so I try not to worry too much about ownership at quarterback because it's usually pretty flat, right? Like I don't expect anybody to be over 15%, and everybody who's starting is going to be like 2-3% at least. So it's usually pretty flat there. I think there's more ownership considerations at the other positions, especially defense and running back, and places like that. Who do I think will have a better game? Brock. Who do I think will be lower owned? Brock. So I'm on Brock. I'm on Team Brock.
Yeah, and I actually found I was looking at like I just took an average of the ownership percentages for the winning Millie Maker lineups last year, and it was one of the lowest owned positions. I mean, that's because, like you said, quarterback ownership is generally
Right.
low because there's just so many options. But
Right.
yeah, yeah, if I can get a guy, I think Brock might probably will be under 5%, and if I can get a guy under 5%, I'll take that all day, especially because I agree with you. I think he'll have a better game. Let's see what we got here. Follow up. What does how many entries in the week one Millie Maker? Um, how many entries we put in that week one Millie Maker?
Um,
3 hour one.
yeah, I'll probably just max it out. But in their 150 is the max. I'll probably just max it out just for fun. But I think that if I was trying to like if I was like grinding and I had a limited bankroll, I would probably play zero in the Millie Maker and play all my money in or 80 to 90% of my money in head to heads.
Definitely, yeah, yeah. I like to do like an 80-20 head-to-head tournament type split. Let's see. How do you use the FanDuel Thursday slate to help predict
Mhm.
ownership? That's a good question.
Yeah, so obviously I'll be updating the Labs ownership projection once Thursday locks on FanDuel for all sites for both FanDuel and for DraftKings for the Sunday projections. There is this very strong correlation between ownership on FanDuel and what happens on Sunday on FanDuel. There is almost as strong. I mean, not. I don't know. It's hard to describe. Like it depends on pricing. It depends on if a guy's a PPR player. There's a lot that it depends on. But like if you're comparing quarterbacks that are similarly priced on DraftKings as they're on FanDuel, you can take a lot from the Thursday ownership. So Yeah, I think Thursday lock on FanDuel is a good tool to use to try to figure out who's popular. But on Thursday, I always say like Thursday lock is a really profitable slate to play because people just don't know yet. Like people haven't listened to the podcast, they haven't watched the Friday Slurve show yet. You know what I mean? Like they just are kind of firing their bullets in there without getting swayed by public opinion, and that kind of skews ownership a lot too. So if there's a guy on Thursday that's really low owned, but then let's say Silva's writing about him and Raybon's writing about him and Mike Clay's writing about him, they all like him, well, you better make some changes regardless of what happened on Thursday on FanDuel. So there's so much feel in projecting ownership, but Thursday lock is definitely a tool.
Yeah, I think to go off that, I think the Thursday ownership on FanDuel is kind of the starting point. It's never the ending point. It's never something you want to say, this is what the ownership's going to be, but it's something that you want to start at, get a baseline, and then adjust based on, as you said, what the experts are talking about, the differences in pricing, etc. What do we think about Mikey Evans against the Falcons secondary? I'm sure he'll see a lot of Trufant, although did Trufant start shadowing last year? I know at one point he wasn't shadowing too much, but did he start later in the year?
Yeah, they use it selectively. We can go back and see if they did it against Mike Evans last year. Obviously, they played them twice, so we'll have that information. Mike Evans is typically a guy that I don't roster very much unless he's going to be low owned. We talk about all the time in terms we want guys who have a wide range of outcomes, which I think Mike Evans does on a week-to-week basis. We want him at low ownership because having him at high ownership exposes us to that downside where he bricks out and he has one of these like 4 for 45 games or something like that. So yeah, I'm probably not going to be on Mike Evans, but he could. There's at any time Mike Evans could just have an enormous game.
Yeah, I think I did the study on correlations and found that there's a pretty strong correlation between opposing wide receiver ones. So if I'm in a bunch of tournaments and I have a lineup with Julio, I think I'm okay with playing Mike Evans in that lineup particularly, more so than just building a ton of lineups around Mike Evans. Should we pivot to? Do you like Doug Martin better in that game than Mike Evans?
I mean, I didn't roster Doug Martin at all last year, probably like 0 times, and I mean it burned me. I lost a lot of money because I wasn't on Doug Martin. He's just I don't know, not like these two down backs. I'm just like so opposed to even in GPPs. I'm probably a bad guy to ask because I'm really biased against them. I really don't roster them at all.
Yeah, I mean, now at this point, he doesn't really excite me too much because I think his price is kind of reflective of his performance last year, whereas most of last year his price was reflective of his 2014 performance when he just wasn't that productive. So at this point, I mean, I know Atlanta, their run defense hasn't been good, and they might be a little bit better this year. We'll see, but it doesn't particularly excite me. I wouldn't go and say completely fade him, but I mean, he doesn't excite me. If you're looking for somebody in that range, that I think is kind of interesting is Shady McCoy because I think he's on the road and I think they're an underdog, and I just think he's going to get 20 plus touches and work in the receiving game because Buffalo really doesn't have a lot there. I know there's been some research done lately that suggests that running quarterbacks don't target running backs as much, but I think LeSean McCoy is going to get a lot of receptions, and I think he's a guy. I think you can bank on 20 touches for him, and I mean, we'll see where his ownership's going to be. I know he's getting a lot of buzz now that his backups are going down, dropping like flies. But I would much rather play him or a guy like Ingram, like you mentioned, over Doug Martin. Let's see. On FanDuel, do we like DeAndre Hopkins for $100 cheaper than Mr. Allen Robinson?
I will go with Hopkins in cash and Allen Robinson in tournaments. Maybe that's a cop out, but I think they're both pretty strong plays. I think Hopkins is safer to me due to the matchup.
No, it's not a cop out at all. That's exactly the way I think you're supposed to think about it. Hopkins is a safer play, but in tournaments you want a guy in a similar price range with lower ownership, and I think that's A-Rob. And I think on any given day, A-Rob probably has more touchdown upside than Hopkins. anyway when we saw how many touchdowns Bortles was able to throw, and a lot of that is because he just launches it to Robinson deep and he launches it to Robinson in the red zone. What percentage of head-to-heads versus 50-50s do you recommend for someone playing in the $1 to $2 level with about $200 per week in play? So yeah, break down 50-50s versus head-to-heads.
Yeah, so if you're playing with a limited bankroll, I would almost always play 100% head-to-heads. And because this is NFL, you can get literally 200 $1 and $2 games. Like, it's not hard at all. And, people say, oh, some shark's going to scoop up my games. Well, first of all, if you're playing on DK, you can set the matchup blocker, and you can also set a maximum number of times that somebody can take your games to 1. But, I mean, I know a lot of the guys that are playing with really big bankrolls, and almost zero of them are taking the time to go through the $1 and $2 level to scoop people's games. So I think that playing 100 or 150 $1 and $2 head-to-head games will give you an expectation of 15, 16, 17% ROI at that level against some really weaker opponents, and then you can build your bankroll from there and start moving up.
Definitely. Is the Baltimore Ravens defense against the run good? I mean, I don't particularly think so. I mean, you got Doomerville off the edge in more in passing situation, but I mean, you got Guy, Jernigan, Mosley. I mean, nobody really stands out as like anyone's going to really be a run stopper in Buffalo. They're a team. There's two things working in McCoy's favor. One is that Buffalo is a team that runs a lot, almost regardless of game script. They just want to run the ball because they have the young quarterback Taylor. They don't want to overexpose him. And also, as I mentioned, if for some reason Baltimore is able to stop the run, McCoy is going to get catches.
No, I think people see the word Ravens defense and they assume this is like the Ray Lewis, Terrell Suggs kind of in their prime, just because it's Ravens. Like, this defense is bad. Like, they're legit bad. Definitely a bottom half unit to me in all facets, both run defense and pass defense.
Cool, man. So yeah, it's about to be 5 o'clock. I mentioned I don't have a ton of time to do preseason research. Give me an under the radar preseason play at wide receiver, Adam.
Oh, hold on. Let me get my list here. Hold on.
I love that you have a real notebook.
Oh yeah, I'm by a pen. I do so much with pen and paper. It's really bad. It's really inefficient, but I do. Yeah, so I think people are going to assume that Kelvin Benjamin is coming off of an ACL and he's not healthy and he's rotating with Funchess. I think Kelvin Benjamin, they're going to let him go in this game into the third quarter. And given that, he's definitely going to be in my lineup along with Cam, who I think is pretty clearly the nut quarterback play. So I like him. I always try to play Rashad Ross because he's my freaking boy. I fucking
oh my god,
love that guy. Yeah.
Yes.
And I guess a sneakier play that might be lower owned is Mike Thomas on the Saints. In this third preseason game, I'm kind of looking for guys who will get snaps with both the first and second unit, and have a competent backup. And I think Luke McCown and Garrett Grayson are at least competent enough that if Mike Thomas gets some reps with Breeze and then some reps with those guys, he can still produce. So there's a couple names I'm looking at.
Definitely. Good calls. All right, so thank you guys for tuning in. Chris Raybon, Adam Levitan. You can find us both on Twitter at our names. We'll be here every Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern on Slurve, all NFL season long. Be sure to check out Slurve for other expert chats, Evan Silva, Davis Maddock, any other fantasy sport you might be looking for. Thanks, guys.